It's been a month after the country's economy exceeded recession, and Nigerians look forward to a rebound going into the second quarter of the year. However, with the recently released figures of unemployment and inflation from the National Bureau of Statistics, it shows that Nigeria might or will face tougher times ahead, raising fears of a more challenging future. According to the NBS inflation report for the month of February 2021, inflation rose for the 18th consecutive month, recording the highest in 4 years. Notably, the headline inflation edged higher to 17.33% compared to 16.47% recorded in January, which is 0.10% greater than the 17.23% estimated by economic experts. On the other hand, Nigeria's unemployment rate rose to 33.3% in the fourth quarter of 2020 compared to 27.1% recorded in quarter 2 of the same year, indicating that an additional 1.42 million people were added to the unemployment pool in the fourth quarter of 2020. The Q4 unemployment data also revealed that unemployment was worst among youths between 24 and 35, where 7.5 million or 37% of the number of the group in the labor market were jobless. With projections and reprojections by different global and local economic institutions on Nigeria's economic growth forecast for the year 2021, the big question is, can Nigeria's fragile economy sustain its growth forecast with the rise in unemployment rate and inflation amidst the second wave of COVID-19 and other economic issues? Well, joining me live via Skype to provide answers to these questions and others is a fiscal policy partner and Africa's tax leader of PricewaterhouseCoopers, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Oyedele.
Thank you, Tolu, for having me.
Yes, we are grappling with a lot. We have a lot on the plate to chew at the moment. We have inflation on the side. We have unemployment rates on the side. We are also expecting growth figures on another side. Now, first, in its totality, how do these figures, how do they come to you? Were you expecting something more than 17%? The unemployment rate at 33.3, what were you thinking of? And when it came to you, how did you receive it?
Yes, so I think if you look at the unemployment rate and you look at the inflation rate and you look at the GDP growth rate, all these for December 2020, which is the Q4 of last year, they do not come so much as of a surprise. For inflation, of course, inflation is not December, inflation is last month. It's to be expected that inflation will be going up from about 16.5% the previous month to now 17.0%. So this is not surprising given the increases we see in the price of goods, particularly food, as well as transportation, electricity costs, fuel costs, and so on and so forth. But I think the one that is more worrying for me is unemployment. So we now have millions of Nigerians who are now unemployed, who were previously employed. We also, if you connect the dots, and you say the economy in terms of real GDP was in the positive territory at the end of 2020, but unemployment was rising, so was inflation. What it simply means is whatever growth we recorded was not inclusive because it was leaving so many Nigerians behind. And what that also means is when inflation is rising and people are losing employment, it means that they do not have purchasing power, and to survive becomes very difficult. This is when you get to a point where people become desperate. This is where you get to a point where people are hungry. This is where you get to a point where people are angry, and therefore they cannot be rational, and they become easy targets for recruits for anything, including terrorism. So this, for me, is one of the biggest concerns. If you look at the breakdown of the inflation rates, for example, you see the rise in food inflation to almost 22% now. And the rate of inflation is higher in the urban centers, which means the urban poor are the most
All right, I think we need to reconnect with Mr. Oyedele there. Technology and challenges. Let's try to see if we can reconnect so that they can, of course, make his point with regards to this very important discourse, talking inflation here. It is really, okay, before we go back to him, let's quickly take you through. Okay, Mr. Oyedele.
Yes.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yes, I was just saying that if you look at the combination of the fact that there's inflation that is increasing and there's unemployment that is rising, yet we have positive GDP growth. Q4, that means that our growth is not inclusive, and we are leaving many Nigerians behind, and they're hungry and they're angry, and therefore they cannot be rational. And if you look at the breakdown of the inflation rate, you see that food inflation has now risen to almost 22%, with the highest rate of inflation being recorded in the urban centers. So that simply means that the urban poor are the most vulnerable at this time. So this is a call for concern for everyone who needs to take steps to address these issues and to address them as a matter of urgency.
All right, Mr. Oyedele, as a follow-up to what Professor Waleke said, do you think this is really the right time to soak in another $1.5 billion to rehabilitate our refineries when we are talking about creating jobs, improving agriculture, looking at the ICT sector? We have all sectors there needed to be funded. What do you make of this?
Yeah, so my answer is, this popular saying of you cannot be doing the same thing and expecting to see a different result. If we have spent over $25 billion on turnaround maintenance over the past many years, and we're not getting the result, so who says and why do we think that this time around the outcome will be different? If you have not addressed the fundamental issues of why those refineries are not working, many of which are to do with vested interests and sabotage, and those people are still there wherever they may be, who don't want these things to work. So I don't see how spending over $1 billion will be worthwhile. We already have the Dangote refinery that is going to come on stream very soon. That should be able to solve the demand that we have in Nigeria so we can supply ourselves and then be able to do some export. I think government should, given their limited resources, they should redirect whatever limited resources we have to areas of the most critical need, particularly those ones that would address our basic need. I think sometimes Nigeria, we are poor, but we don't behave like a poor country. So we should be focusing more on how do you provide basic needs. People just need to survive, first and foremost. If you direct $1.5 billion to issues around food security, including agricultural value chain, supporting small businesses in a very genuine and sincere manner, not the one that the audio support that people talk about, you begin to see the impact. And of course, some of it to be directed to education as well as vocational training. So there's a lot to spend money on. I will not, my top 10 priorities, this refinery turnaround will not even come anywhere close.
Oh, that's really interesting. Top 10 refinery won't even find a place therein. Now, back to the inflation figures, Mr. Oyedele. A lot of firsts in these figures. Food inflation rate is the highest in even 15 years. Wow. Inflation is also highest, all the highest and highest and highest. Now, let's stay with food. Some say partly because of the closure of the borders that we had earlier, and of course issues around COVID-19, and at the same time now insecurity is on one side, and that is what is responsible for this hike or increase in figures coming from that segment. Do you agree with that? It's a two-in-one question. And on the other side, it shows clearly that our purchasing power continues to dwindle, because our salaries now, we can't even buy what we used to buy with it because everything is on the high side. What will a Nigerian face in 2021 with all of these increases? PMS, electricity, and all of this.
And this is where the concept of the mystery index comes into play. So you have rising prices by way of inflation, And then you have falling purchasing power because people are losing employment, and also because of inflation, prices are increasing. So these combined impact means that people become miserable because to survive becomes difficult. And I do agree for those analysts who said this is a combination of factors. So we have the border closure, COVID-19 itself is playing a role, but I'll say now a limited role because really, even when the border was completely closed, prices were not as high. So which means the biggest impact is not really to do with border closure anymore. It will be, in my view, to do with, first and foremost, the increasing exchange rate. So because Naira is falling in value, exchange rate is rising. And that means anything you import becomes more expensive in Naira terms. Of course, insecurity is playing a big role. Unfortunately, it will play a bigger role going forward if we don't address the issues urgently, because now if you don't allow farmers to go to the farm, it's not only just prices of food being more expensive now, it will be more expensive 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the line. So this combination of issues are the reasons why we're seeing the rise in food inflation in particular. And just to remind ourselves that majority of Nigerians, more than 50% of Nigerians, spend between 80 to 100% of their household income on food, just trying to survive. So which means that more people now are being pushed into poverty. More people can no longer afford a meal. And that's very difficult. And nobody should think that they are okay and not concerned, because, like they usually say, when the poor cannot sleep because they are hungry, then the rich also cannot sleep because the poor are awake.
True, and that is really true. Also, Mr. Oyedele, government at the time talking about selling some assets, and I guess this refinery should have even been part of what will be sold or leased, or maybe partnership, public-private partnership with people that are ready to invest, and of course, they will get proceeds from this. They won't put their money where they won't get profit. Now, when you're thinking of selling assets, and on one side, you're also investing $1.5 billion on the same refineries, it looks conflicting to me, Mr.
Oyedele. Yeah, I think first and foremost, Nigerians need to try and move away from is their sentimental attachment to assets, even when the asset from a technical point of view is a liability. So we spent over 120 billion naira on refineries in the past few years without producing any refined products. So how is that an asset? So which means we're even better off, giving it out away for free, and would have saved 120 billion naira. So I don't think it's only the refineries. If you ask me, there's so many assets there. What Nigerians need to understand is that when you sell an asset, something like a refinery, or even take the Ajakuta Steel Company, no, if you sell it, nobody can take it away from Nigeria because it's physically in Nigeria. So it's still an asset in Nigeria. It's just the ownership that changes. And if that ownership goes to the private sector and is more efficiently run, so what will happen is you create more employment, you create more value and supplies, and then you also have, preservation of foreign currency because you don't have to import many of those things anymore. And on top of that, government collects taxes because any profit that you make, you pay taxes. You pay VAT on supply of those goods. People you employ there will pay personal income tax. So actually, by selling those assets, Nigeria is going to be better off for it than holding on to assets that, in my view, have long ago become a liability. And it's a long list of them, including the refineries.
Now, analysts now say almost finally, they say we should be ready, fasten our seatbelts, and it could even get worse. That's talking about the figures, inflation and all of that. Mr. Oyedele, do you share the sentiment?
Yeah, I think I wish I could say no, but unfortunately the answer is yes. My own prediction also is that these things will get worse because if you think about it, whether it's exchange rate, there's no immediate signs or signals that Naira would appreciate against major foreign currencies. There's no indication that the insecurity we are dealing with will go away tomorrow and farmers will be able to go back and produce. There are no indications to suggest that productivity and supplies of goods and services would improve significantly. So I'm afraid to say, yes, my expectation also is that these things will get worse before it start getting better.
Well, it's a good way to leave it. It's just that I still want to ask if we can do this in 1 minute. Inclusive growth we talk about. All inclusive growth. Any quick wins. What can government do? I think there need to be some deliberate strategic efforts that can make us make remarkable progress.
Yeah, indeed. You know, if you want inclusive growth, you have to first look at who are the people that we are leaving behind now. And the people we are leaving behind are mostly the young people. So even from your own analysis, we see people between the ages of 25 and 35 have the highest rate of unemployment. Same thing with small businesses, the MSMEs. If you want to ensure inclusive growth, you have to develop policies targeted at those groups. How can you make doing business in Nigeria seamless for a small business owner, for medium-sized company? How can we create opportunities for our young people? And those opportunities, sometimes they don't even need government help. They're just saying, government, don't come in our way. Allow us to try. So government needs to get out of the way for where they are becoming a hindrance. And in the other places, they need to facilitate growth in the small business area as well as for our young people. And that will help us to be able to get some inclusiveness in our growth.
Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, it's really nice talking to you, fiscal policy partner and Africa tax leader, PricewaterhouseCoopers. It's always a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you very much for your time.
It's a pleasure.